question is for Mr. Brian. So most of the time what happens in these hate crime cases, they don't get reported. And from what I have studied and researched on hate crime, it's mostly because either people do not trust the law enforcement agencies and officers, or sometimes the officer's bias against the victim is also seen as a reason. So can you just share some?
Is this one more there? What you're discussing is
just hold it a little closer, because sorry.
Is this one better? Yeah. I think what you're discussing is the amount of trust between the community and law enforcement. And I think, unfortunately, and at least for me personally, sadly, that relationship has been more challenging in recent years between a number, many minority communities. But at the same time, I think this particular issue, that tension has caused an examination of the issues, both from trust in the communities to law enforcement and law enforcement's obligation and responsibility to be responsive to those. Part of my job, as opposed to, it goes beyond simply supervising my 6 or 7 investigators, is to reach out to be at events like this and to encourage people to report these incidents, and that the Hindu American Foundation has made progress to even just simply basic, like identify anti-Hindu as a category of hate crime, to build that infrastructure that then in turn supports the community. So I don't have a very specific answer for you, but I know at least from the FBI and law enforcement in general, this outreach part of the job is vitally important to let people know that we're here and we're listening, and if you do a particular problem, that it is that you shouldn't hesitate to raise the issue, or if you have an officer in the community who does not respond, it seems to be callous and non-responsive, then we encourage you to raise that issue with that particular department.
Is the federal or state statutes, do they cover actually a plan or conspiracy to commit a hate crime versus an actual hate crime? Do you have any statistics about that? So there's 2 questions. One is, does the statute include a conspiracy or plot, somebody planning to do something? And if that is the case, under the UCR, is there statistics on that?
So there are a number of federal statutes, hate crime statutes. I only addressed 4 or 5 of them, and there are at least, I can't keep every element of every statute, but there's at least one that involves conspiracy with proof. And I'm going to pass on statistics for you.
I don't have any specific statistics on how the reporting within the UCR is capturing conspiracy to commit a crime versus the underlying offense. To just build on what Kelly said, that there is a statute that actually kind of facilitates some of the catch-all, and it's a conspiracy against rights. It's 18 U.S.C. 241. And what I think some of what you're getting at is a lot of these are individual acts and actors. The outburst of a person exhibiting an extreme amount of bias. But if we bring in a conspiracy, so 2 or more people acting in concert, taking overt acts with a plan to violate someone's civil rights, that gets us there. And actually, sometimes is a jurisdictionally a straighter line. Now you've got to prove, what they're doing to plan, how they're coordinating. But sometimes the conspiracy against rights is, if you have a group or a couple of people acting in tandem, is a cleaner and more direct way to charge civil rights or hate crimes statute, civil rights or hate crimes investigation.
Question for Mr. Mears. When to all of us it seems so obvious that the hate crimes legislation, should be enacted in Indiana, what do you see? What would be the reason that we don't have it? What are the obstacles that have been thrown up against that?
Well, first let me start by saying I agree. you know, the people that I see who we deal with at the legislature frequently, they will say that it's covered by existing laws or other laws, which is simply not accurate. I think the other thing is, and not a lot of people want to say this, I think the inclusion of individuals because of their sexual orientation or because of their gender identity, I think causes a lot of heartburn for a lot of legislators, especially in different parts of the state. They never articulate that, but in our conversations with them, it is clear that is a concern that they have, that they don't think would be well received by their constituents. When they make the argument about the existing law covers it, it's just simply not true. And there are numbers of examples. You know, we have domestic battery and battery in the state of Indiana. Why do we do that? Well, because domestic battery is a special class of crime and we need to address that and treat that differently. We prosecute that differently. The punishment needs to be different for that. It's the same thing in a hate crime situation. And we've made those arguments and we've tried to explain that to some of the legislatures who are hesitant. But those are the two main reasons that we get in terms of pushback.
So how does the minority community can help you guys to get to that?
I think the biggest thing is making yourself known. Be vocal with your legislators. You know, most of them are up for re-election in 2018. And so it's important to let them know that this is important and that this is a priority. You know, I mentioned earlier the growing coalition of organizations who've kind of joined us on this fight. And I think the fact that, I mean, why are we only one of a few states that doesn't have this law? Are we right and the rest of the country is wrong? I very much doubt that. And so, I mean, I think the biggest thing that we can do is bring attention to this issue and aggressively let legislators know that this is a defining issue for me. You're either for us or you're against us. And that's the only thing that makes politicians act. If there's a sense of urgency in 2018, there's a sense of urgency.
So if I can provide some perspective from the National Advocacy Organization. The hate crime in Kansas really rocked the Indian American and Hindu American community there. And immediately after that crime, there was a meeting with Governor Sam Brownback. And he was very open and gracious to meeting with us. And within that meeting, you know, he expressed some of the concerns that those in the Republican Party may have with the classification of a hate crime. He articulated that, well, a crime is a crime and should be prosecuted as such. But I think the sheer volume of hate crimes has really pushed the needle. Unfortunately, this is what it took, but it's really pushed the needle in our favor here because more often than not now in Washington, I see in congressional hearings, which are chaired by, in committees chaired by Republicans as they are the leaders in the House and Senate, that they are actively speaking about hate crimes and they are acknowledging that these crimes are happening. So I think the tide is in our favor here and we just need to harness this opportunity with our colleagues in various religious community organizations like the Anti-Defamation League, the Muslim American community, Sikh American community, and Jewish American community, and the LGBT community, and all of those. And we really need to push on this. And I was speaking to somebody at an interfaith event in Washington on Friday, and I was mentioning that, yeah, I'm going to Indiana, I'm going to speak on this panel, and they're really worried because there's no hate crime law. And he said, you know, Indianapolis particularly has really built a reputation as being a business center, as being a place for inviting, you know, corporations to invest and to come here in conventions. Or Indianapolis is a place for conventions. And he said, you need to get the business leaders activated to ensure that this is good for business. You know, having diverse, safe communities is key for having companies come here with diverse employment, with diverse employees so that they can feel safe in their houses of worship, in the community centers, in the city centers, and in their homes. So we really have an opportunity here, and I really want to work with all of you and with Sujata and Anita and all the community leaders to harness this opportunity.
Hey, first of all, I appreciate all of your time. Can you put the mic?
Yeah, my question is, so far we talked a lot about mature or adult people about the hate crimes, but what I missed in the whole discussion here is we didn't talk about at the school level. Like when I talk about the school level, in very small, like elementary schools, I have seen like the kids are turning into like bullying other minority kids and all. So if you can just give us some highlights, what you guys doing on the or what we can do at the school level?
Well, thank you. That's it's a very timely question because the Hindu American Foundation, I believe last year we published an anti-bullying report and it was a small sample size of Hindu American students from across the country who gave responses, but our basic statistics I think show that 3 out of 5 Hindu American students at some point felt socially ostracized, particularly around the time when Hinduism was being taught in the school social studies curriculum. And also it's very clear what most Americans, the first impression they're going to have about Hinduism is not from coming to a Hindu temple like this on a tour. It's going to be what was written in their 6th grade textbook that was mandated by the school Board of Education and the State School Board of Education, or by some governing body that determined that this curriculum was appropriate for school students. And oftentimes, we have found at the Hindu American Foundation, we have an entire team on education that works on curriculum reform, have found that those facts are just simply not inaccurate, they're misleading, and they cause bias in our schools. It's, I believe, on Thursday, December 7th, and Anita will be sharing this information with all of you. We have a webinar on our anti-bullying, or on our bullying prevention work. And this webinar will enable parents to have the tools they need to help prevent bullying at the classroom level. And also, it will provide you more information about an expanded survey that we are conducting, and we need respondents for that. We need Hindu Americans from every state and every major city in the country to respond whether they have or have not had incidences of bullying impact them, because we want to know that information. If the statistics show that bullying is on the decline, we want to publish that. But if it's definitely showing, if it's showing that it's on the increase, we have to know that so that we can engage the Department of Education, the Department of Justice, the state agencies and local agencies to address this topic effectively, but we need the data. So the key is, please attend this bullying survey on a webinar on Thursday, and then there will be further instructions about how you can participate, how your student, people in your household can participate.
The Department of Justice unveiled a new initiative this fall that is combating religious discrimination in schools. And again, U.S. attorneys like myself are charged with going into our school communities and working with folks like Jay from the Hindu American Foundation and developing some curriculum, developing some outreach. I particularly look forward to doing that in Indianapolis. So I'm a lawyer, but I'd rather spend time in a classroom. And if you've met a lot of lawyers, you know why. But so I welcome the opportunity to advance that initiative here in Indianapolis too.
One thing that, in addition to what Kelly's offering and Jay, is in our agency, because after 9/11 we saw the persecution of Muslims, or Sikhs actually, who were thought to be Muslims. We developed a Muslim cultural awareness training. We developed training for Sikh Americans as well. But there is no PowerPoint in my agency on the Hindu community.
We'll correct that.
So he knows Harpreet in my agency, so he and Harpreet will get that together. But imagine, for example, if you had a PowerPoint tool that you could sit down with a local superintendent or school principal, for example, and say, I'd like to make a presentation to parents and students about the Hindu culture. That then undoes, it helps to undo bias with familiarity or instruction. And so people get past their stereotypes the more they know about a particular people. So I would encourage that as well. And then we have a student problem identification and resolution of issues program together called SPIRIT. And we do that, and I'm going to work with Kelly and Greg Wilson, the Civil Rights Director, on trying to get that done and implemented here in the state as well.
Do we have any other questions? Ken was very gracious in mentioning how we got here. And I think one of the people that were the most instrumental in getting us here, because they were so brave about coming forward about what had happened to them in their business, are here today. And I would like to acknowledge them. The Patnaik family is here today, Rajesh, Vidya, and Janet. And without their bravery and their willingness to stand forward and proclaim themselves as Hindus and proud Hindus, we would not have this panel here today. So thank you so much.